My husband, Anthony Davis, has been keeping a girl lately, and she's not the obedient sort. He's spoiled her so much she's forgotten the sky has a ceiling, bold enough to make a scene in front of me. Bright-eyed, chin lifted, she even refused to call me Ms. Davis. Miss Madison, she said stubbornly, in love, the one who isn't loved is the real third wheel. I smiled with my eyes, lifted a long, slender finger, and yanked the pearl earring from her ear. A bead of blood sprang from the torn lobe. Behind me, Anthony appeared, jaw clamped tight. Alexandra's eyes merely reddened. Mr. Davis, please don't be angry. I'm sure Miss Madison didn't mean it. Anthony only took my hand and blew softly across my knuckles. Angela, does your hand hurt? Alexandra stared at him in disbelief as fat tears spilled down. I, meanwhile, smiled, just a little. Anthony's secretary escorted Alexandra away. She seemed to have 1,000 things to say, no doubt she couldn't understand how the man who'd been so gentle and attentive yesterday could be like this today. Anthony's tenderness toward me is not a performance. He spotted a faint mark on my finger and kissed it again and again. Angela, he said, a shadow of disapproval in his dark eyes, a woman like that isn't worth your lifting a finger. I looked at Anthony, face composed. His reaction didn't surprise me. We were childhood sweethearts, inseparable as children. He is not, by nature, a mild man, yet with me he is endlessly indulgent. In our echelon of old, grand families, rotten marriages abound, yet I am the one he begged for. When we married, my friend Susan could only envy me. By the time a person reaches a certain height, even basic ethics start to feel optional. Anthony is sincere with me. Susan says that, in great houses, fidelity is treated like a shame. Perhaps wealth swells to a point that asking a man to remain forever faithful becomes a rare thing. For many families, even keeping up appearances is achievement enough. But Susan has seen the way Anthony serves food onto my plate, the unguarded smile that rises whenever he mentions me. He cares for me. Just not 100%. At a certain station in life, the absence of birdsong around a man is what would be odd. The few songbirds Anthony keeps from time to time, as Susan sees it, are nothing worth mentioning. It's far too common. When filth is the norm, it's the clean who look out of place. Dinner that night was cooked by Anthony. A young man so accomplished and still willing to cook, rare, to say the least. Even my perpetually exacting mother couldn't stop praising him. They all seemed to envy me, to have most of Anthony's love and all of his indulgence. If I so much as knit my brows, whatever I dislike vanishes from my sight. He carefully sliced my steak. I lowered my gaze and ate in small, neat bites. His phone kept flashing. I reached out, and he, thinking I wanted a sip from his glass, passed it to me with a thoughtful hand. When he realized I was reaching for the phone, he merely smiled, wiped his fingers on the napkin, and handed the phone over. Wife, it's rare to see you checking up on me, he said, genuine amusement in his eyes. Anthony has never taken much trouble to hide the matter of his songbirds from me, perhaps because there's no one around him who does better. He treats his wife with respect and care, puts me first in all things. What's more, even my own parents each keep their separate worlds. I know of several illegitimate children, at least. My mother, having never borne a son, chose a decent one to inherit the business. He respects my mother and treats me, his sister, with real affection. Among grand houses, fidelity is a joke. However gentle the manners, the bones are rotten. I opened his phone. Alexandra was already nowhere to be found. I understood at once, having offended me, she was unlikely to come to an easy end under Anthony's watch. Scrolling further down, I found Ashley, one who has been around Anthony for some time. I'd heard of her, tactful, head bowed, all demure submission, like a quail whenever she sees me. Anthony appreciates such discernment. She's had no shortage of opportunities lately. Only a few days ago I saw her at a jewelry gala. I attended as Miss Davis, Anthony seated on my right. Ashley, wearing a diamond necklace, sat opposite, which was, in effect, a presentation of the piece to me. I gave it a second glance, and Anthony bought it on the spot. Ashley thanked me in a soft, gentle voice. Sensibly, she didn't linger, much less come preening up to my face. That night Anthony even sensed my quiet displeasure and murmured at my ear, "Don't like her? I'll replace her immediately." The feeling in his eyes was not feigned. What I dislike, he discards. I tilted my eyes and smiled. Anthony, aren't you being a little too sensitive? Since childhood I've called him by his full name. When we were little, I'd sit behind him, the wind would balloon his shirt, and I'd rest my cheek against his back. It smelled like sunlight. It was the stirring of spring. The first bud of love. Anthony patted my hand. In the dim light his voice turned sweet and sticky. Angela, I often think about all we've come through to get here. I said nothing, only looked off into the distance. That night, Anthony did not sleep beside me. He said there was something at the office. I straightened his clothes for him with care and watched him go. Not long after, Susan called. Hey, I think I just saw your Anthony, with that bastard of a husband of mine. Heard they ordered several. But don't worry, your Anthony isn't that wild. Usually one-on-one. In the dark, I turned on the lamp. And how many male models did you order? Susan laughed. I used to ask you along, but you're an outlier, you hate all this, never learned the fun of it. Angela Madison, you need to broaden your horizons. It's best when a couple plays together. If only one of you clings to fidelity, your heart will clog up. I didn't answer. Her voice went on, Angela Madison, I know what you want. But you have to understand, once you're high enough, women flock to a man. The air is all flattery and fawning. To remain untouched is, very hard. I haven't remained untouched, I said softly. Susan made an intrigued little sound. You're keeping someone too? Who? Tell me. I was about to speak when the door opened. I curved my eyes and neatly hung up. Standing at the bend of the stairs, I looked toward the entry. Tim came in cool and quiet, flicked on the lights with practiced ease, slipped off his shoes, and stepped inside. A gentle-featured youth, he saw me and offered a shy smile, lifting a hand in a small, polite gesture. I met Tim on a rainy day, the day I learned Anthony had someone on the side. I sat on the bench at the bus shelter, rainwater mixing with tears, pattering to the pavement. When you love with your whole being, you grow possessive. Here a betrayal, and even the mildest temper is threaded through with jealousy. But I had seen too much of such things. Friends, relatives, my parents, all had been poor examples. When they spoke of it, they scarcely spared it a thought. For a long time I felt like the odd one out. Even Susan, who understands me best, looked at my wan, listless face and simply couldn't fathom it. Angela, the Davis family is valued at $300 billion. Anthony is one of its brightest. With that kind of status, to have no women circling is unrealistic. Everyone urged me to take it easy. Anthony was merely insufficiently faithful, hardly a mortal wound. But I swallowed my pain, afraid to let it out, because I had seen my mother, ravaged by it. A vase shattered to pieces on the floor, and my gentle mother was twisted into something sickly. Later she, too, sought consolation elsewhere, revenge at first, and then, eventually, a habit she could not quit. Her eyes, once gentle, carried a hungry sheen when she told me that when resistance is impossible, one can only go with the current. Tim stepped into the rain in front of me, holding an umbrella. He was tall, his fingers were pale as carved jade. When he smiled, a small dimple touched his cheek. I tipped my chin up and told him to get lost. He seemed not to hear, only tried to place the umbrella in my hand. I turned the anger I had nowhere else to spend into the cruelest words I could muster and flung them at this stranger. Tim only looked at me, calm-faced, steady. His eyes held a sea's patience. After a long moment, he lowered his gaze and typed a line on his phone, sorry. My hearing aids are in for repair today, so I can't hear what you're saying. He lifted his eyes, crescented like a new moon. The words stuck in my throat, neither up nor down. Shame burned, at myself, for venting at so docile a boy. We met again in a university lecture hall. I'd been invited to speak as a success story, to talk about the rises and falls. At the ribbon cutting, I saw him. He was among the outstanding students chosen to take photos with me. Unexpectedly, when I accepted the photo from my assistant, the boy's features were mild, starry, moonlit. I don't know what I was thinking, I had my assistant send him a set of hearing aids. While I was still distracted, Tim, a backpack on his shoulders, tapped on my car window. My assistant frowned, I told her to hush. Smiling, he returned the expensive device to me. Hello. This is yours. He looked at me with that same even gentleness. In that instant I realized he didn't remember the drenched, disheveled woman at the bus shelter. After that, I began to appear near Tim more often. At first, I had no particular design. Perhaps it was simply that there are so few truly unalloyed creatures in my world. Perhaps when money swells past a certain point, life turns dull and one seeks a diversion. Around that time, Anthony found his second songbird, a girl bright as noon, who loved and hated boldly. Having just discovered the flavor of it, he was enchanted. I saw him rarely. More than once he slipped up and spoke carelessly in front of me. I kept my temper, eating in silence, watching television in silence. Anthony would ruffle my hair. But Angela, the road we've walked together, it isn't the same as any other. Of course I understood what he meant, I knew he was sincere. Between him and me, the bond is different. I have never doubted the reality of his feeling. We are equal in family and proud in bone. Once, on an empty lawn, I kicked off my heels and danced under the moon. He, all good temper, carried my shoes, his eyes full of me. At the grand wedding, he promised to love me forever. He did not promise to love only me forever. Tim is punctilious by nature, buttoned to the throat. Before I quite realized it, I discovered he had fallen for me. Whenever we spoke, the tips of his ears were red. I couldn't help a laugh and asked if he wanted to hear me play the piano. The cherry blossoms were out, students drifted in twos and threes along the shaded paths. We walked a long way. Behind the school, near the rail line, freight trains always clattered by. That day, in the slanting light, sunshine slid along his cheek. The air behind us thrummed with a heavy rumble, rumble. Tim brushed my hand, as if afraid the noise would startle me, and covered my ears with his palms. His fingertips were warm. Just then his lips moved, he said something. I asked him what, and he didn't answer. Later, in the car on the way back to the villas, I pressed my fingers to my brow and, suddenly, smiled. Not long after meeting Tim, I learned a little sign and lip reading. If I read correctly, what Tim said was, I like you. The boy's love was bare and earnest. I felt base, because he didn't even know I had a husband. A boy like that, clear as the moon, could never grasp the tacit pastimes of old families. For a long while, knowing I slept poorly, Tim would drive over at night and read me stories. We never crossed a line. Sometimes I even slipped toward indifference. I didn't scrub the house clean of Anthony's traces, though, tellingly, there were never that many to begin with. He was busy enjoying himself elsewhere. Later, though we were smooth on the surface, inside we had come apart. As today, Tim, as usual, read me a fairy tale. A nanny raised me, my parents loved me, perhaps, but not closely. At the international school, my classmates began competing at 8, a life too precocious left me almost untouched by stories. Blinking, I asked Tim if the huntsman wanted to kill Snow White but let her go in the end, would Snow White forgive him? He was used to solving one riddle of mine per day, he didn't even need to think. Yes, he said. Why? I countered. If I were Snow White, I wouldn't. Someone who tried to kill me should spend eternity in hell, never seeing daylight. But those who lose their way and return, he said, across half a meter of air, why shouldn't they be forgiven? I don't know what surfaced in me then. Since I was born, anything that involved money I rarely took to heart. People around me fawned, befriended, kept to their circles. Some did whatever they pleased, lawless, chasing dangerous thrills. I kept my distance, but long exposure makes even the grotesque familiar. I stood abruptly, tipped my head, and kissed him on the cheek. Color rushed across that white skin, his eyes brimmed, blinking wide. Madison. Angela. Warmth filled my chest. Tim, do you like me? Even his throat flushed scarlet. I did not expect Anthony to return. I was in a loose sweater under the lamp, reading. He surveyed the rooms first, seeing no one, he relaxed and came to me. He slipped off his watch, voice mild. Sorry, Angela. I didn't tell you the truth, I was with Steve today. Steve is Susan's husband, I don't care for him. Susan once had someone she truly liked, but a clan marriage makes light of liking. Steve dealt with that man, the end was not kind, and he left for another country. When he went, he only insisted Steve treat Susan well, said she was the best girl in the world and deserved to be loved with a whole heart. He never blamed Susan, never blamed Steve, and he left with a book she had given him. Afterward, Susan did not fare well. Steve is defiant by nature, beyond corporate necessity, the marriage was a way to put Susan in her place. His humiliations never made her cry. But I have seen her fragile. The day that man left, she hid alone in a room and tilted her face toward the sky. Her eyes were red at the corners. It seems that questions of character are not counted serious in a man's mind. Even knowing my chill toward Steve, Anthony would say nothing aloud and privately think Steve had done nothing wrong. So many things are customary, they become natural. I closed the fairy tale book and curved a smile. It's fine, work, I said. Anthony lifted a hand to touch my forehead, but the cold on him was too sharp, and his cologne hung heavy, he drew back. I'll shower first. The smile had not yet left my face when I turned, and froze at the sight of a half-peeled orange on the cabinet. A great shadow fell over me, I looked up. Anthony's face was composed, his tone unreadable. Angela, I remember there were no oranges in the house when I left. Did you ask someone to go out and buy them? He knows I dislike oranges, they never appear here. So who, after he left, ate and set one aside? He still, considerately, offered me a pretext. I had only to step onto the slope and ride it down, outwardly, we could return to the life we had before. Anthony, I set the book down and looked him straight in the face. When Susan called me, you were there listening, weren't you? That's why you suddenly came back. Susan probably thought I haven't exactly kept myself pure, was a joke. She could not imagine someone as straight-laced as I am, keeping a lover the way they all do. Anthony, however, knows I don't make that kind of joke. He left the party and drove back through wind and rain. At my words, his eyes darkened, ink pooling in black. He flicked the half-peeled orange to the floor, even his back looked cold. I pressed my fingers to my temple, drew the throw over my legs. Thunder rolled. Lightning split the sky. In that glare, both our faces looked a shade too pale. After a long time he turned again, his expression gathered tight. He opened a cigarette case and, with a mute tilt of his head, asked permission. He almost never touches the stuff, his self-control is iron, he sneers at such crutches. Outside, rain sheeted down. I nodded. He lit one, drew it halfway to the filter in a single breath, as if to tamp the pressure in his chest. Then, when had I taken someone on the side? I told him the truth. His brow cinched hard. At length he drew a long breath. Angela, I thought, you wouldn't. He had reason to be sure. I once walked in on my mother in her affair. In our world everything is bound to interest, love is gilding, dispensable. My mother seemed different. She looked as though she truly loved my father. People teased that a true romantic existed after all. She was the one who made love feel sacred to me. But in the end even she was dazzled by this glittering world. It was she who told me, fidelity matters least, because we are all caught in the whirlpool. And yet her courage back then carved itself into me. I believe someone ought to keep doing what they believe is right. Anthony knows me too well. He knows I love him. I am not like the others, call it lofty, or call it naive. Which is why my having someone else knocked the breath from him. But Anthony was still Anthony. He set his hand over mine, feeling the beat under my skin. Angela, when can I meet him? Let me look him over for you. I pretended not to hear the probe, the question whether what I had was a flicker of loneliness or something that would endure. If the former, he could sigh in relief. He wanted me to volunteer it. I said it years ago, we are childhood sweethearts, comrades in arms, the two people who know each other best. Anthony is no fool. In those churning years in his family, I was the one who stood watch at his side. My love has never been in doubt, a candor no later beauties could match. I said long ago that the road we walked as teenagers would admit no one after us. What they see now is President Davis, the man crowned with success. Once, he too was a boy whose ears flushed red at a single "I love you." Anthony, there's no need to test me. Let's divorce. I finally said it, evenly. It took me 5 years to reach this day. He will never know how wretched and broken I was when the first songbird appeared, how the girl's bright smile and his indulgent fondness, that looseness in his brow I'd never seen, hollowed me out. Novelty kills. Perhaps it was despair. I fell seriously ill, lay under a drip listening to a nurse gossip. She said how romantic Anthony was, so many roses for a single smile. They seemed to forget there was a Mrs. Anthony. In scandal, the late-comer is always the fragile one. He was drunk on it then, none of the later stillness. More than once he missed what was wrong with me. I have a proud spine, I do not permit myself to show weakness. Yet that night my tears soaked the pillow, something sat on my chest, crushing and airless, and for a moment I thought I would die. I called him. A girl answered and told me he was in the shower. What does Ms. Davis need? Pain makes you cruel. I snapped and ordered her to hand him the phone. She didn't. I heard her crying, I heard him soothing her, asking whose call it was. She told him. He took the phone after a stretch of silence. Even then a foolish hope rose, love mangles the heart that way. I could feel my own lifted high. He said only, Angela, don't be like Susan. Those weeks, things were ugly between Susan and Steve. She'd made his life difficult. Unable to touch him, she aimed at the warblers around him. Anyone who brushed against Steve then had bad luck. Everyone in the circle knew, he lost face. And in an instant it felt as though someone had closed a fist around my heart and dropped it, indifferent, from a high rise. Smashed to dust. By midnight the tears at my lips were bitter. Perhaps he realized he'd gone too far, his voice softened. Angela, are you afraid of the dark? Beside him the girl's laughter, syrupy and small. I tucked the phone beneath my pillow and said nothing more. For the first time I saw clearly, Anthony was a good neighbor boy, a competent decision-maker. My fatal mistake had been to pit our threadbare affection against family face and unwritten rules. I didn't suffer long. A nurse found me in time, after a flurry of rescue I kept my life by a margin. He called and messaged in the days after, said he'd been drunk, that Steve's griping the day before had put him in a temper and he'd taken it out on me. I sat with my head bowed, the cannula taped to the back of my hand, leaned into the soft pillow, and watched leaves drift past the window. Anthony, I'm Angela, eldest daughter of the Madison family. What binds us isn't just you and me, it's a billion-dollar partnership and a century of goodwill. My voice was mild. He said nothing. At last, Angela, it's like you've grown up. I didn't reply. I'm no prodigy. It took me 5 full years to cut him clean out of my heart. Even after I stopped phoning about the girls orbiting him, nights alone still felt like knives. Sleeplessness, suspicion, anger, despair, all of it bought me this moment where I can look at him calmly, and even smile. Let's divorce. His face then, disbelief, time stilled, the beauty twisted, none of the old gentleness. I want nothing, I added slowly. Impossible. He snapped back to life, cutting me off. Angela, do you have any idea what I'm worth now? There are privileges to being Mrs. Anthony. He himself has become capital. We met each other's eyes for a beat. The indifference in mine seemed to wound him. He sank into a half-crouch beside me. Angela, we don't have to come to this. Love is a thin thing. Rank and riches line up ahead of it. But Anthony already owns those. So that thin thing seems, perhaps, to weigh a little. Anthony, we ought to part decently. We're people of standing. I tugged down my sweater to bare the hollow of my throat. A kiss mark. His eyes narrowed, dangerous. Who is he? Who's the man? Tonight's confession must have rattled Tim, that cool boy kissed with no technique at all. When his mouth slipped to my chest he jerked back, flustered, stammered that it should wait for after we marry. Then he warmed milk for me, told me to sleep, and left the house. I didn't answer Anthony. Something feral flashed through him. Angela, why would you let yourself feel? How can there be a third person between us? Who gave you permission to love for real? Anthony, one can't be that greedy. You can't have it all. Blood rimmed his gaze, cords stood in his neck. He smashed everything to hand. Angela. I didn't flinch, only stepped back. Anthony, Madison stands behind me. You can't touch me. Don't bother with threats. I had thought he would mind the contracts and the face we shared. Red-eyed, he only asked, why? I could not tell him. The asks I never voiced in those years when my love burned clean, I could not voice them now. So I reached for the most tactful instrument I possessed, civility. Even divorced, we were childhood friends. I wouldn't set myself against his work. Anthony, I've never doubted your ability. I have no designs, no gambits. I'm simply laying down the aura. I think, we were never quite right. My tone was gentle, my words as sincere as I could make them. I'm asking why you came to love someone else. Business, glory, the rest meant nothing to him just then. It startled me. I had always thought liking was the least important of things to a man like Anthony. If I weren't Angela, he would never have married me. And in the year we married, neither of us knew if he would win what he sought. Perhaps we were unequal from the start. Angela. His voice softened, he leaned toward me, urgent to prove something. Where did I fail? For a moment, seeing him like that, I wavered. Then some darker impulse swelled. Perhaps Anthony does care for me. I curved a smile. Anthony, have you ever, at some point, regretted that we didn't have a child? If there were such a bond, perhaps I wouldn't look so ready to go in your eyes. He stared, pulse hammering. He wanted to stop me then, suddenly, fiercely, but the tremor in his chest stole his breath. He could only wait. And I wanted him to face the cruelty I had once swallowed. I wanted him to know there is no going back. So I went on, I once had a child. He looked at me with a plea rising in his eyes, begging me not to go on. I ignored it and continued, I miscarried, when you took up your second little songbird. Anthony, what stands between us isn't the person I love or the one you love, it's that for years I've been letting go, piece by piece. I've always known where we would end, and I refused to drag a child into changing a fate already fixed. Back then, Susan lacked the courage to break out of the cage our families had built. But I had it. After that day, Anthony seemed to become someone else. Susan clicked her tongue. What did you feed him, a love potion? I hear he threw a fit and cut off the people around him. Ask Steve to help pass the word, I said, unhurried. I'm serious about the divorce. She was quiet for a while. You're really doing this? Will the Madison family agree? The one currently in charge is a bastard son. He's wary of what our alliance with the DeVises means. Susan said nothing, only murmured that I was luckier than she was. Anthony's tactics for winning me back were nothing new. He drove me out to the old estate, pointing at the big tree, smiling. Angela, remember? You climbed it, and I stood beneath with my arms open and caught you. I humored him with a nod. Yes, right after I told you I was Miss Madison of the Madison family. He fell silent. His place in the Davis family was shaky then, trouble had erupted on his mother's side, and his father refused to help. So after I named myself, he drew inexplicably near. In hindsight, he was courting the Madisons. Later I heard he had tracked down the doctor who performed my abortion. His presence cowed the entire hospital. The physician had to think a long time to recall me, my face white as paper that day. From his account, I wasn't firm at first. When I learned I was pregnant, my fingers laced together in restless doubt. He asked whether my husband knew. I must have remembered something, because I went soft-voiced and said I wanted it gone. They say Anthony's face went black. He grabbed the doctor's wrist and demanded to know why I had changed my mind. The doctor, recognizing who he was, didn't dare invent anything, and in truth couldn't remember. A nurse ventured forward and, timidly, told him the day's top headline, the video of Anthony publicly backing Ashley. The girl's mien said everything. All the money men took the hint, no one would touch her. A man like Anthony doesn't leak a video like that by accident. He allowed it. He wanted the world to know Ashley was his. Maybe he only wanted to keep a spotless girl, but in that instant, I made my decision. When they rolled me into the operating room, the light overhead was blinding. I didn't feel pain, only glare. It made my eyes water. Later, Anthony called. His voice was rough. Angela, I am certain of this, where our marriage is concerned, I have never been divided. That isn't what I want, I answered. I want to see the love my mother used to talk about. Whether he calmed down after that, I don't know. Likely my words made him scoff, sentiment, children's stuff. Until Tim phoned. The boy sounded gentle. Miss Madison, I heard, you recommended me for study abroad. Happiness lifted his voice. It was, by any measure, a rare chance. Later I learned Anthony had funded a cohort and chosen a few. But I knew perfectly well who the target was. Do you want to see the world? I asked Tim. It's not a bad idea. Only, I won't hear your stories anymore. I knew the program ran 8 years and required a contract promising not to return mid-course, under penalty of a staggering sum. I don't believe in oceans running dry or heaven and earth enduring. I have never had such things. I believe in champagne and paper lanterns, and in how quickly hearts change. Anthony asked to meet. I refused. I sat on a bench in the square and fed pigeons. He found me anyway. The wind cut sharp. Without thinking, he looped his scarf around my neck. Anthony, beyond dangling incentives, do you know any other way to move a heart? I asked. In an age ruled by law, I can hardly threaten you, he said mildly. Angela, nothing in this world is worth your stubbornness. We go round and still, no one suits you like I do. For a moment I didn't recognize him. What was this supposed to be? A late-coming, grovel to win your wife back arc? Crocodile tears? So money tests human nature, and the lesson is that nothing much matters? Anthony. Those bastards in the Davis line, you suppressed them, yes, but they aren't dead. If I joined hands with them to make trouble for you, that wouldn't be pleasant, would it? I slipped the scarf from my throat and placed it back in his hand. He stared into my indifferent eyes. You stand on the moral high ground while giving me grief. When others give you grief, do you imagine you'll suddenly awaken? Repent? No, you'll feel disgust. I scattered the kernels in my palm. Angela, you love me. You won't love anyone the way you love me. Why can't we start over? He asked. What is Tim to you? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't so much as look his way. He is not fit to wedge himself between us. His voice rose. I hadn't seen him like this in years. He had always been the man at ease, always in control. If so, why did you fling your songbirds in my face? I smiled. Those women aren't worthy of a second glance from me. Yet you set them on a platform meant to balance me. Anthony, are you worthy of that? I curved my eyes. The color drained from his face. I thought, I might finally be free. When Tim called, I was at the airport. My secretary said he was booked on that flight. I won't pretend my feelings for him were yet so deep I'd burn bridges. But he had kept me company so long, I owed him a send-off. Only, I didn't see him. When he picked up, his voice came, soft and rambling. Miss Madison, I received the hearing aids this time. I was selfish, for a second I wanted to believe they were a girlfriend's gift. Expensive as they are, I didn't want to return them. Is that, all right? In my eyes Tim had always been shy, and steadfast. He has strengths I do not. I'm sorry, I said. I'm not interested in a long-distance relationship. Across a sea of people, I lifted my head. He stood 3 meters away, lifted a hand, and waved. He hadn't left. He hadn't taken Anthony's bait. He knew how rare that chance was. Even if he stayed with me, I could not promise him anything so rich. He wore an oatmeal sweater. Only then did I notice the one he'd given me matched, couple's knits. The boy's eyes were clear as weather. He came toward me, and for a heartbeat I saw that rainy day again, my eyebrows drawn low, his eyes bent into a smile, asking if I needed anything. I didn't ask why he hadn't gone. He didn't ask how I knew his flight. We fell into step, side by side. He laced his fingers through mine and led me through the crowd. The Davis family was never going to let Anthony be dragged by romance for long. On the day we signed the divorce, his face was stormy. The settlement was generous, everything but company shares. Money I already had, but who minds having more? I once thought we'd last forever, he said, chin propped on a palm, eyes lingering. The world has never cared what you or I thought, I said, rising. Goodbye, Anthony. As a girl, I would smile just like that at the gate each time he walked me home, and I'd see him again the next day. This time, I would not. We both knew. He said nothing. As he had for years, he watched me go. We had reached as far as we could go. He had his creed, his empire. The greatest grace he granted me was that brief season when he tried, sincerely, to hold me. Tim waited downstairs. Joy lit his features. "Did you finish with him?" he asked, voice low. I looked him over and nodded. He let out a long breath, then, bravely, took my hand, eyes asking if he might. It had been so long since I'd had a love this innocent. Something stirred, rare and new, and I smiled. "Tim, come up and read me a story, and don't go home tonight." He walked ahead. At that, his ears flushed scarlet. I thought he wouldn't answer. He tipped his head in the faintest nod. The sun was generous. Everything, at last, had to begin again. Epilogue, Tim's POV. The first time I saw Angela, she stood in the rain, eyes rimmed red, tears falling in heavy drops. I understood every word of her tirade, I read lips well. But in that instant, for reasons I can't name, all I could see was the soft pink of her mouth opening and closing. So I pretended to be weak and told her, by showing my phone, that I wasn't wearing my hearing aids. She fell silent at once, remorse filled her eyes. I understood then, she has a soft heart. She had no interest in me. On campus they called me a prodigy, a golden boy. Plenty of people chased me. I didn't care, until Angela. She spoke smoothly on stage. I sat in the audience and could see only her tear-filled eyes from that day. People teased me, had I fallen, was I aiming at a married woman? Yes. I knew she was married early on. Only she thought she hid it well, she scarcely wore a ring. My love for her came like a storm. I had no idea love could strip reason so clean. After a dozen small surrenders, Angela indulged me more and more. She even let me come to her house and read her stories. I chose tales full of goodness and light. 100 times I wanted to claim her, to mark her. I couldn't. I only dared, when she wasn't looking, to feast my eyes on her. I left little traces on purpose, hoping her husband would notice. He was too dull. Until the day Angela tired of the game. I knew then, at last, she felt something back. Afterward, her husband hounded her. He even tried to buy me with the future, promised that if I agreed, I'd have my pick of women when I rose high. A fine offer, on paper. He didn't know I never cared for such things. I am not as harmless as I look. My obsession with Angela kept me awake nights. But she liked me gentle, like the purity her circle lacked. So I wore the lambskin, all patience and grace, to keep her gaze on me as long as I could. Maybe she doesn't love me very much. It doesn't matter. If she turns her head, I will coil around her like a snake, heel her like a dog. On the day they divorced, Anthony watched our backs with his head bent. When Angela invited me upstairs, the joy in my chest shook me, even then I almost couldn't sheath my fangs. "My Rose, I will love you forever."